Folks were just not willing to play the games anymore.
From Interfaith Alliance, this is State of Belief Radio. I'm Interfaith Alliance President Rev Paul Raushenbush, broadcasting this week from New York City.
They believe that women voting is the problem in America.
As we record today, votes are still being counted across the country. What we have seen is that in some significant races, Christian nationalism was rejected by voters as Americans continue to show preference for a more inclusive and welcoming vision for America. We also saw the overreach of the Supreme Court as voters in both red and blue states showed their support for the right of individuals to make choices about their own reproductive health. And we celebrate that 2 open lesbian women won their governor's races in Massachusetts and Oregon. However, complacency is not an option. Innovative and dangerous new strategies to subvert our democracy are no doubt already in the works. So what we need now is a long-term commitment to pluralism, to inclusive American values, and durable alliances that make it possible for us to stay connected and to support each other. On this week's show, you'll hear from 2 leaders with amazing track records in this kind of work.
They wanted Syrian people elected, right? Not the extremists who are denying, the results of election and so forth. That's what people want. They don't want games anymore. They want actual solutions.
Reverend Josh DuBois headed up President Obama's Office of Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships from 2009 to 2013 and was known during that time as Pastor-in-Chief. He is the CEO of Values Partnerships and Gauge, the author of The President's Devotional, and a media commentator. Josh DuBois is one of our country's top voices on issues impacting the African American community, as well as religion in the public square. He is sure to have unique perspectives on what happened in this week's midterms and what didn't happen, and why.
When you really listen to far-right pundits and commentators, some of them are 100% transparent that if women stopped voting, they could get everything done that they want to get done.
Impact Seat Foundation CEO Cheryl Conti knows firsthand how essential diverse and empowered leadership and workforces are. She is chair of Netroots Nation, the founder of the tech company Do Big Things, and the co-founder of Attentively, the first tech startup with a Black female founder to be acquired by a NASDAQ company. Ms. Conte brings deep expertise on effective values-based organizations and alliances with a focus on unclogging the channels of opportunity for women. She also happens to be an overall awesome person who I turn to when I am looking for insights on what's really going on. You can hear State of Belief on the radio and get the podcast on Apple Podcasts and all the other podcast platforms. Every week, I will be in conversation with the most fascinating and impactful civic and religious leaders across the nation. You won't want to miss it. State of Belief Radio is made possible in great part by the generous support of our listeners. If you have made a donation, I really want to thank you. If you haven't pitched in yet, information on how you can help keep this show on the air is available at stateofbelief.com. And you can find out more about the work of Interfaith Alliance and join in that work at interfaithalliance.org. And now to my first guest. Not that many years ago, Josh DuBois was named to the 33 under 33 most influential faith leaders in America list by Christianity Today. Reverend DuBois led faith outreach in the Obama White House, and today he's head of Values Partnership and an in-demand commentator, author, and public speaker. Reverend DuBois, welcome to State of Belief Radio.
Oh, it's an honor to be with you. Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you in particular. So I would love to, let's go back to Tuesday night. I don't know how late you stayed up. I was up at 2:30, just keep on, doom scrolling. Actually, it wasn't quite doom scrolling. How were you feeling that afternoon and that evening?
It's so interesting, Paul. My wife is the doom scroller in our household. I have this sort of, whatever is going to happen mentality about elections after it's all. And this dates back to Obama days. I would knock all the doors, make all the phone calls, and then when it was time to wrap it up, I went home and had a bite to eat. I might have poured a little scotch and just kind of let it roll. And
oh my God, you have to give a seminar. You have got to give a seminar, because we all need to learn from you. It is true. Like, I kind of feel like I'm doing something by scrolling, but you're not. But it is like, the truth is that everything that has happened by that time, especially once the polls close, has been done.
And there's something really sweet about waking up at 5:30 or 6 a.m. with many, if not all, usually not all, but many of the questions resolved, and processing it at that point, right? Rather than sort of piecemeal throughout the night. And so anyway, but different people have different approaches. That was mine. And so my realization was a bit more the next morning when I saw that, this red wave had not materialized, that the predictions of many sort of did not ring true. Unfortunately, I have good relationships with some people that I believe are phenomenal leaders who were not successful in the election. Folks like Stacey Abrams, whom I've known for years. Mandela Barnes and Sherry Beasley and others. And so there was a little bit of processing that as well, but a lot of hope too. My dear and friend, Reverend Senator Warnock, seeing, his extraordinarily competitive race that I believe will ultimately be successful in the runoff, and just really heartened by how people who believe in equality, who believe in justice, really kind of put their foots down while it said enough is enough, and that that no matter what the prognosticators said, that they were not going to let those predictions carry the day. And so anyhow, it was definitely a set of mixed emotions, but a fair amount of hope as well.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit from your lens as someone who has led faith outreach. And really has a keen eye towards to how religion plays out in our electorate. How do you imagine it played out in these races? Before I let you, I want to share your disappointment that those excellent candidates, I would include Val Demings in Florida as one of those candidates, excellent candidates who I hope we have not seen the last of. I hope that there's many ways that all of them can show up. As a Wisconsin boy, I want to say, like, what a disappointment. I mean, severe disappointment that my state did not recognize an excellent candidate when they see it. But back to the question, how did religion factor into those races? But then more broadly, what are you seeing?
Yeah, well, I will say, and Rev, you have seen this and kind of fought this battle for years. Usually when that question is asked, the first thing people do is center the role of white conservative evangelicals and Catholics. And so I want to intentionally not start there, because for me, that wasn't, although that, that's an interesting storyline and an important one. There were some other things at play. I was so encouraged by the groundbreaking work, and it really is groundbreaking, that my friend, Dr. Barbara Williams Skinner, in partnership with Jim Wallace and others, did to deploy poll chaplains around the country.
Yes, we had Barbara Williams Skinner on this show 2 weeks ago to talk about that very work. And
wonderful.
That's a really important point, because the violence and the intimidation that was threatened, really, I think, due to that kind of work, there was a way it was just like neutralized. We're not going to do that.
And what they did, both in the places where those chaplains were, but also even where they weren't, just the fact that message was out there, it created a contrast between the spirit of peace and of democracy and of reason that they were seeking to cultivate around our elections, and the insanity that some others were seeking to bring to polling locations and Dropbox locations and so forth. And it made, I think, it made people realize, it made the electorate realize that that they're the pathway that involves peace and reason and democracy is the better pathway, right? And so I believe that they are just beginning, and that they had a tremendous impact, and that efforts like that were deeply, deeply meaningful. I also I think in Black churches around the country, through civic organizations, civil rights organizations, and in mainline Protestant spaces and more, people mobilized, and they mobilized for voting rights. They mobilized to protect women's health care. They mobilized for reasonable approaches to poverty alleviation and criminal justice that take into account the very real concerns people have about things like crime, but also the desire to have a nuanced, balanced approach. And young people, including many young people of faith, stood up and they went to the polls motivated by their own values, and said that, and they let those values be very clear in terms of the candidates that they selected. And so that's what won. I think a progressive vision of faith and values won, right?
100%. 100%. I think that's just such an important, like, that there were, it was very interesting. Even in red states, minimum wage passed,
Exactly.
like some really like just common sense bread and butter, actually. And you wrote something on Twitter that I want to read, because I think that more people should hear it. There are major exceptions to this, but candidates who are perceived as reasonable and solution oriented generally win more than candidates who are perceived as ideologues. The party that figures this out better will do better overall. And I think that what we did see is that people were just not up for it this time.
Yeah.
They're tired of it. I mean, notable exceptions. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Notable exceptions. But I also want to lift up the campaign of Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania, who was really working against the most explicit Christian nationalism, candidate who really was making that an issue, and even making the Jewish faith of his competitor an issue. And people were like, "No, thank you. No, thank you. We're not going to do that here. No, thank you."
Yeah, I mean, it was I think a response to the anti-Semitism we've seen in recent months, in response to that candidate who, in sort of implicit, implied ways sought to sort of filter anti-Semitism into that conversation. Yeah, I mean, that sentiment carried. And you know what? After 2 years of a pandemic, although we're not fully on the other side of it yet, after all that we've been through, inflation and more, folks were just not willing, to play the games anymore. They wanted serious people elected, right? Not the,
oh my God.
Extremists who are denying, the results of election and so forth. They want serious. Now, I will say, even for progressives, that there's a requirement and a desire for seriousness as well. Like, let's not play games on the left either, right? And feel like we're just sort of preaching to the choir rather than implementing solutions that are helping people's lives, like minimum wage, like healthcare coverage, like advancing voting rights and fixing the Voting Rights Act and so forth. That's what people want. They don't want games anymore. They want actual solutions.
Right. So talk to me, a little bit, like one of the interesting storylines here is DeSantis and Trump.
Yeah.
And like, who is carrying? I honestly think this is the thing. Above all of it, who's waving the flag of Christian nationalism harder? Is like almost like the way, I mean, like, have you heard have you heard, I admire nothing about Trump, honestly, to be frank, but he did come up with a new name for DeSantis.
Oh,
have you heard about this?
Yeah, that's,
yes.
When I need a chuckle, I admit to going to his Truth Social page and just kind of get a good.
I mean, honestly, but here we are, like, who's carrying the banner of like Christian, and underneath that is, of course, white Christian nationalism. I'm just curious. Maybe I'm overinflating it. I mean, you can talk me down, as you already have.
I don't know that I know who's who's in the lead in that race to the bottom, but I on balance, I'd say it's probably the former president, because I mean it's sort of this Q tinged ideology, right? That is like, it's not just leaning into wedge issues like DeSantis is doing, but it's really kind of getting into the craziness, right? I mean, it's so that is
I'm sorry, into the what?
The craziness of the Q ideology, right? They're doing rallies with Michael Flynn and shooting pretend arrows into the ground. Like, I mean, so I think they've taken Christian nationalism a step further into really almost this cult-like, fervor around Donald Trump. And so because of that extra layer of just, really madness, like, I mean, that's kind of what it seems like. I don't think that's an overstatement. I would say that, that appears more dangerous. At the same time, it's also clear that the general public, including some moderates and conservatives, are weary of that act a little bit, and I think we saw that in the election results. And so,
that's right.
To some extent,
that's right.
Not to get into prognostication here, but to some extent, who would be more likely to pose a challenge to a more progressive worldview? It would be DeSantis, because he's more of a mainstream conservative figure at this point, whereas Donald Trump is provoking these extreme reactions and now increasing backlash. And so I would say Trump is probably a little bit more dangerous, but he's also more polarizing as well.
Yeah. Well, DeSantis a few weeks ago, used that scripture about putting on the armor of God and saying he was sent by God to
I did say that, yeah.
Own the libs is a shorthand for it. But so this is going to be ongoing. The role of religion, I think, is going to come flaring up in the battle between Herschel Walker and Reverend Raphael Warnock. And I'm just, first of all, let me step back and just say, you have had to, in your career, you're aware of the Johnson Amendment. You've had to coach people on what does that mean, why we have that on the books, and how to go forward. Can you? I have no idea how the Johnson Amendment is going to be used and abused in this, because but tell me a little bit how you see the Johnson Amendment in this moment in American politics.
Yeah, I mean, largely, and unfortunately, in some states, completely ignored, right? And I mean, that's the
just back up. Can you just explain what the Johnson Amendment is? Because you had to navigate that as a faith outreach for President Obama.
Sure, it's a provision in the tax code that I think since 1954 has prohibited 501c3 organizations from endorsing a political candidate, right? And most houses of worship are 501c3s, and so as a formal matter, while an individual faith leader can express her or his preferences, that person cannot do so on behalf of their institution, of their organization, because they get the benefits of tax-free status. And so in exchange for those benefits, one of the things that they have to agree to is that they're not going to be explicitly sort of political or partisan. Now that line is being sort of erased around the country, and has been for years, that this is not a new phenomenon. And I think one of the challenges is no one, even among sort of progressive departments of justice and so forth, no one wants to necessarily be the one prosecuting a pastor, right, or a church for any violations of the Johnson Amendment. And so it's the sort of thing where houses of worship in the past have largely kind of self-policed themselves, and they try to be reasonable and so forth. And now that's just kind of fading away. The situation in Georgia, though, is so, kind of galling because of the dramatic contrast between these two people. And listen, that he was without sin cast the first stone. This is not about sort of my a personal critique of Herschel Walker's behavior, past, and so forth. But it's issue after issue, day after day, we keep finding something that, goes directly against his public statements related to his faith and values, and the declared positions of evangelical leaders in that state. And they're willing to just look past it and look past it and look past it. It's on the one hand, you don't want to condemn someone because of their past. On the other hand, a tree by the fruit it bears, and this fruit is dropping all over the place, man. And and so
I mean, it's very Trumpian in that way.
Yeah, it really
no one can look at Donald Trump and say, well, there's an honest Christian man. I mean, you can't really say that, but you can say he's a vehicle for power.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I'm sorry to break it down that way,
but
that is. I mean, if you look at the, frankly, the white evangelical church, 90% of them went for Walker.
Yeah.
And that's just, because they view him as a vehicle for what they want to accomplish.
That's exactly
right. And they would be the first to cast the first stone if they didn't think he was the vehicle.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to watch. And then you have a gentleman that both of us know and have watched, and who is such a deep thinker, a nuanced and a committed Christian, mm-hmm. who has worked his whole life trying to proclaim it. I am a supporter of him. I'm not endorsing him on behalf of anything, but I just think he's an amazing man. And you have these two figures who are both representing actually almost an archetype of the way faith is operating in our country.
Yeah, it's so true. And there's the figure who's representing a seriousness about his faith, a level of consistency. I mean, this is the pulpit of Dr. King, for goodness sake. This is and then someone who it almost feels like he's toying with religion, right?
Yeah.
It feels like it's
it's interesting. I saw on Twitter this thing. A lot of white evangelicals like to talk about how they would have supported a pastor from Ebenezer Church who was working to change the country on issues. They like to talk about that, and they're supporting Walker.
Yeah. Well, and Paul, you'll know this so well. They like to talk about that, but Dr. King, for many years, particularly after his speech against the war in Vietnam from New York. He was the most hated man in America and condemned by everyone, including, quite frankly, not just conservatives, but mainstream progressive figures.
Sure.
He's taking it too far for even them. And
I would say even some black church. I mean,
there were
I remember Dr. Lewis saying in an interview that I did with him, he said, if everybody who says now they were part of the civil rights movement was actually part of the civil rights movement, it would have been accomplished very much more quickly.
But true.
Let's just tell me, if you were wanting to help people understand how to position these, because this is going to be frankly, up until it happens, it's going to be such a conversation topic. How would you position, if you were in charge of the conversation, the messaging around faith, how would you position those two candidates?
Well, if I was, I don't know how I would necessarily position Herschel Walker. I can't even wrap my mind around that. But in terms of Reverend Senator Warnock, what I would say is I would put working families first and really articulate how my agenda is going to support people who every day are coming home and they're trying to figure this thing out. They're trying to figure out how to make childcare work for their kids when, the cost of daycare is exploding. They're trying to figure out that grocery budget when, everything seems to be more expensive, and that gas budget. They're trying to figure out how to get their kids not only through elementary, middle, and high school, but how to get them to pay for college or trade schools when those expenses are increasing as well. And I would talk about the different places across that picture of life where I want to be helpful, where I think the government can be helpful. I think we can rally around them and support. And then on some of the hot button issues, I would talk like a human being. For example, on an issue like abortion, I think there's a lot of people, even conservatives, who believe that there's a level of sanctity and just a deep moral dimension to the question of abortion, but they also have some discomfort with a legislator making these decisions for women rather than women and their partners and their doctors and so forth. And I would bring a level of nuance to that, right? That yes, I support a woman's right to choose, but I also believe that we should surround families with as much care and support as possible, so that that choice is made more easy if they feel like they have the support that they need for children to thrive. And so I think what a lot of independent voters in the state of Georgia and other places want is just a little bit of permission to support a progressive candidate, and by creating space for them, I think he can go a long way, particularly given who the candidate is on the other side.
Well, and you mentioned, we lifted up what you had said on, Twitter, just that workable solutions. Yeah. And then religion is about what does it look like? Honestly, I think everything comes down to what does it look like to love our neighbor in policy. If you can just ground it in that, it doesn't have to be big, flowery language. It doesn't have to be apocalyptic and we're fighting some dramatic. This is about loving our neighbor in tangible ways, in political ways, in ways that our government can. It's just super important. I want to switch a little bit to some of the other work you're doing, which is so exciting, by the way, like translating your brilliance around the Obama White House. I'll mention just for a second, if you all have not read the president's devotional.
Sorry, Paul. I have a little visitor
who's that? Bring him.
Brad, this is Auden. Hi. Say hi to Paul. Yeah.
Hey, how you doing?
He brought me some bread. So sorry.
Oh, so good. Hey, what happened to your head? What happened to your head? Did you get a boo-boo?
Did you get a boo-boo in your head? Yeah. Okay. We'll see you in a little bit.
Yeah, that.
Bye.
I have a boy about your age, and boo-boos are a daily occurrence. So.
They happen all the time, man, as you know. So, man, life is good. So I lead two organizations. One is called Values Partnerships. We're the country's largest Black-owned social impact firm. It's a mouthful, but what it means is we work with a bunch of different clients, from Oprah Winfrey to the Gates Foundation to the Ad Council and Procter & Gamble and others, and help them build campaigns that connect to communities. And one of the big things we're working on right now with the Ad Council, we're so excited about an upcoming massive campaign focused on mental health and people of faith. And so we're mobilizing Black and brown churches and other partners around the country to say, after this pandemic, how are we going to pick up the pieces and make sure people are focusing on wellness? How can we equip pastors and leaders to teach and talk about mental health? What resources already exist? And really, how can we get well as a people, right? And so
this
we're about to launch next year.
Yeah. You've been seeing this bubble up. This is part of what it means to care for people. And there, in some communities, I've seen this also in other religious communities, mental health is like a stigma. And there is, it's health is health. Yeah. And so people sharing, being open and being able to ask for help, and that you're working on that is so amazing. And I think the Ad Council is lucky to have you. Talk to me a little bit about Gauge and what Gauge can mean for the broader public. What does it mean to be smart about cultural?
Gauge.ai, and it's the first market research platform that connects brands and organizations and foundations to thought leaders in communities. We realized that a lot of folks were launching big new initiatives, whether it's a big nonprofit campaign or a big new product or what have you, and they never spoke with people who understood the communities that they're trying to reach really well. They never spoke with top leaders in the LGBTQ plus community, or top Hispanic and Latino leaders, or voices in the African American community before they launched this big thing out there. And so we've convened now 13,000 thought leaders and experts and civil rights leaders and civic voices and faith leaders and others, and we help people do research with them before they launch stuff out into the world. And so, we're the largest provider of insights for CVS Health now and Snapchat, and we're working with different foundations and organizations, helping them understand what community voices think before going out into the world. So that's what we do.
Because a lot of times there are missteps.
That's right.
Missteps is a nice way to put it.
That's right.
Like incredibly dumb things done.
Or
is
stepping in it is another way to say it.
Stepping in it is a better way to put it. Okay, so I assume that Elon Musk has reached out to you.
Oh my goodness, he has not. But I have to pray about, Paul, the mix of horror and glee of sort of watching all of this unfold on Twitter right now that I'm
all
feeling. I don't know.
All of us.
It's like you have a live stream on the Titanic and you're just kind of like, watching the thing go down.
Well, the Titanic, I felt like, I'm just really, it's very curious to me. And I think this is such a lesson for us about tech companies. Like, we are at the beginning of tech.
Yeah.
These companies, they seemed like, oh my God, Facebook. It's like, it's as if it's going to be here forever. Twitter, it's like, in 200 years, people are going to be like still in Twitter. No, these things,
they come and what go. We're seeing here. That's so true, Paul. That's a radical point. I mean that.
Twitter is 12 years old.
Yeah.
If you think about the start of the car industry, all of the major players are gone.
Yeah.
That we're the ones that were going to make the car industry. Now there's new players, and Tesla is one of them.
Yeah.
But Tesla's going to go, and here we're going to go back to, with Twitter. I can't believe it. I can't believe how fast this is happening, and frankly, how bad he is at this. Yeah. I mean, it's really
I have friends that love their Tesla. He's shooting some rockets into space. It's okay to be pretty good at cars and rockets and not to be good at social media.
Apparently,
okay, right?
So.
I'm not good at everything.
Apparently so. But you know what? I do want to say, like, it's sad for me because I love following
Twitter
people on Twitter. I think it's been such an eye opener. I learn things every day. If you follow the right people, if you figure out how to make it work for you rather than work against you, I've learned so much, and and it's been so helpful for me to be in communication with people that I will lament its impending demise. And maybe we're speaking too soon. I noticed that Cheryl Conte is in the room. Yes, do you know Cheryl? Have you two met?
You, yeah. I think we may have met before, but yeah, great, really good to connect.
Okay, well, these are in my cosmology. This is like the North Star and the other North Star. So, I mean, you are both. Yeah, I know, but I'm not good at cosmology.
The South Star.
Why not? Why not?
I'll
Anyway,
South Star. I lived in Chicago. South Star.
Okay. I just, I'm delighted that you're both on this show. We are finishing up with Reverend Josh DuBois and introducing Cheryl Conte. But let me just say, Reverend, it is always a pleasure to be talking with you. Always learn so much. And by the way, I'm going to connect you two because you are two of the most amazing entrepreneurs and smart people around culture, around faith, around and around like how to build a society we need. So I'm delighted to see you both here together, and I know that you've got to jump. Reverend DuBois, but thanks so much for being with us.
It was a pleasure, Cheryl. So good to be connected, and hopefully we can. I'd love to learn more about you and the work you're doing. So, Paul, I would love to be connected. Okay,
you will.
All right,
you
will. Back at you.
The Impact Seat Foundation is making very real changes in this country and beyond by focusing on values in business. Raising up women, especially women of color, in innovative and sustainable ways, CEO Cheryl Conte has a particular keen sense of what works in this country and what doesn't. Cheryl, welcome to State of Belief Radio.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Always a fun time.
Give me your kind of Tuesday evening, Wednesday morning, however you do elections. What was your kind of vibe? How were you processing it? What did you think?
I mean, I was pleasantly surprised. I mean, one shouldn't be surprised that the nation is turning a corner. I mean, I think we all hoped that at some point people would wake up and sort of smell the coffee and think, you know what, this sounds like bull crap. Like, I'm not here for any of this. Like, no, thank you. So, the fact that so many election deniers went down, the people, that message no longer really resonates. And deep down, people do understand, or most, at least a slender majority of people understand that this is not okay. The fact that, a lot of this critical race theory, some of the people who were running very, very hard on that, like those people were not super successful. The fact that, reproductive rights, people spoke out very, very clearly.
It was a sweep. It was absolutely a sweep, and in red and blue states.
Absolutely. So, I think that I think that if there was one message, Democrats are under a lot of criticism for, their lack of a clear, compelling, coherent message. And I do think that if they had one, just something that was just simple, like we don't have a version of build the wall or drain the swamp, right? Like we need that. That's, people can only apparently, people are busy. They're overwhelmed. They need like a very simple, clear message. Hope and change, dignity, freedom, and justice for all. Like these are messages that would probably resonate. A chicken in every pot, right? Like, so we don't have that.
Right.
We don't have that. However, I do think that Biden and other Democrats really spoke out very consistently on the topic of our democracy itself is at threat. And I do think that message does seem to have gotten through to people.
Yeah, and they were under such attack for that. Even the day of, it was like, this was so stupid. This was so stupid. I mean, nothing like eating your own, but anyway, but I think that was the one clear message that I heard. Like, let's not vote for crazy, would be another.
What if we didn't vote for crazy? Like, think about it.
That's just an idea, just putting that out there for everybody. But anyway, I think that's right. I'm curious if there were particular races that you were watching that you were like, okay, this is a very good sign. For me, I honestly think that the abortion sweep in places like Montana and in Kentucky, it was just very clear, we're not doing this. We're not going to do this. Sorry, this is not what we want. This was an overstep from the Supreme Court. And if you think that about that, you're going to think that about a lot of other personal issues where people should have the right to make decisions about their own bodies and their own lives. Religious freedom is about making decisions about your own lives. And what we saw is that was under attack, and people decided, no, we want to give people the freedom to make choices about their own lives.
Absolutely. And I think, again, people smelling the tea. Okay. Like, the next stage, there are a group of conservatives who've been very, very clear that, this is the first step to same-sex marriage, to contraception itself. Like,
contraception. Come on now.
You're not here for any of that. And, so with my work at the Impact Seat Foundation, we're all about creating a world in which women, especially women of color, can be successful business leaders. And I think one of the things that we have been trying to say is, when you have a child, how many children you have, right? Like the space between them, this directly impacts economic outcomes for families, not just women, for families. And so, I think that I think that there are a lot of people who fundamentally understand that it's not just about whether or not you're having a baby. I mean, that's important, but it's also about, right, your freedom to direct your life. I mean, our country was founded on, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And something like choice,
that's right,
absolutely, bumps up against that.
Fits right into that. And also, like, let's have a little consistency. If you really want people to have babies, provide maternity leave. Provide health care for women. Why did Texas refuse to release maternity mortality rates before the election? Like, so another guest that we've had, and we had a guest who was like brought a suit against that. Like, we have to, in a broad way, like, what is the consistent ethic that we can put so that women have the right, whoever's having a child has the right to make choices about their life. So I just think that's really important. And, as long as we're on the topic of abortion, I think that, you pointed out there was a Slate article that really talked about abortion and religion. And people don't know, but actually some of the earliest activists on providing abortion before Roe v. Wade were actually religious people who saw this as an issue for people, for their constituents, and mobilized, these networks, which are now coming back. And so I'm curious what you've been hearing, what you've been seeing about, how religion is playing into this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah, I do recommend that Slate article for folks. It's called The Religious Left Has Found Its Mission. And it's all about really the return of the religious left, to this topic where they really were leading. So there was a group that was founded in the 60s called the Clergy Consultation Service. They were founded before Roe v. Wade, and thousands of they helped 500,000 patients between 1967 and 1973 to get abortions when they needed it. So that organization is now called the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. But we see all over the country people, I think Jews are standing up and saying, hey, what about our religious principles? You have Muslims also coming forward, Satanists. Okay. 100%. Like they could, that's a religion. Yeah. So, I do think that, the majority of people are coming forward and saying, hey, we envision a very different America, but we also saw, so I wear a lot of different hats, as you know, Paul. So, I'm also
yes, I do.
I'm also the chair and founder over at Do Big Things, which is all about providing the new narrative and new tech for a new world that we're living in for progressive causes and candidates. And we worked extensively with FaithWorks in Georgia, which is like 1,000, religious leaders came together in Georgia. They reach hundreds of thousands of parishioners saying, look, our very fundamental freedoms, are at stake here, including voting rights. And so, we work with them on, social media content, because they're not internet people, they're pastors. Right. So, our job was to really take their messages to the people, whether social media content, ads, just helping to educate, particularly Black men, on voting rights. So very, very proud of that work, and hopefully we'll be, working with them on the recount. But Reverend Warnock, is sort of at the head of, right? I mean, he's the spear tip of the religious left right now in Congress.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was talking about that with Reverend Joshua, and well, let me first say, like, in your intro, it was like the longest intro I've ever done, because there is like no one who has. Let me start a successful venture over here with Attentively. Oh, now we're going to do Fission. Oh, okay, so now we're going to be on the chair of Netroots. Oh, now we're going to stay on the head of the Impact Foundation. I mean, it's just on and on and on, and you do it with grace. And you do it with, making time for a low life like me to be able to talk to you. So anyway, I just want to say, thank you so much for all you do out there. I wonder if you just want to say a little bit about gender and the election. There's been a lot of conversation about, we talk a lot about Christian nationalism, religion in the election, but what about gender? How did you see that play out? Specifically, there were some excellent women of color who won, and then excellent women of color who did not win. How did that play out for you?
Yeah, it was a mixed bag, this election, and it's still not over. I mean, there are still, there is a woman of color in Arizona, who hopefully will be, senator again from that state, but we don't know quite yet, right? What's going to happen there? I was really encouraged to see so many young women of color in state legislatures, and that was a place where,
isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, that was a place where our team over at Do Big Things really spent a lot of time, working with state legislature candidates, because we believe in that pipeline, right? For one thing, after Dobbs, those state legislatures are very important right now. Okay.
Very
a critical, whether it's, reproductive rights or, whether it's election, integrity and voter suppression, state houses are incredibly important right now. But also it's the pipeline, that's where, our next representatives in Congress, right? Our next, senators are going to come from, our next governors, our next attorney general. So, right. we were really pleased to see that there's this new influx of young talent, that is stepping forward and saying, you know what, we want a different America than this. And look, when you really listen to far right pundits, right, and commentators, some of them are 100% transparent that they believe that women voting is the problem in America. That if women stopped voting, they could get everything done that they want to get done.
Well, it was very funny. I can't remember. I wouldn't mention his name if I could remember it. Someone said, there's too many unmarried women who are voting for Democrats. I was like, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Jesse Waters.
So
Jesse Waters.
That was it. Yeah. I wasn't going to mention it, but you could mention it. But he was like, yeah, too many unmarried women. Yeah. We just need to get them married, and then that would solve it.
And to be clear, this is a guy who left his wife for his intern, an intern whose tires he deflated so that she would have to get a ride with him. And that's how he started there. So not rapey at all, or sexually harassing.
No, that's super charming.
He sounds awesome.
That's a charming.
He sounds like a winner.
Yeah, he sounds awesome. And the one we want to be informing policy around women. But talk to me a little bit about it's a little. Well, so there's a half full, half empty narrative that I've seen both of them around how well women of color did in North Carolina, for instance, in Florida, but falling short, and I don't know, it feels like you have such high caliber candidates who just are not, I don't know if we can just say this is misogyny and racism, or if it's we're taking a step forwards. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
2 steps forward, 2 steps back. Look, we have the highest ratio of women in the United States Congress ever in American history. So, things are changing. And when you look across state houses, women are stepping forward. And there are, a lot of organizations that are helping and training women. You know what? You probably know this statistic, but, listeners might not. So on average, it takes 1 to 3 asks for a man to, people to say, hey, you should run for office. It only takes a few, to get a man to, the confidence to be like, yeah, why not? I'll run for office. It takes 7 to 10 requests for a woman to have the confidence to step forward, right? So, there's definitely a lot of energy around, creating that network, of support for women to say, you can do this and we're going to help you. So, one of, a friend of mine, Erin Velarde, you probably know Erin, founder of Vote Run Lead, has, the list of women they have trained and who have gone on, to win is really inspiring. And I, suggest you check out Vote Run Lead, but, there's a real movement out there. And, even though, right, it's still a mixed bag. Again, I do believe that if Democrats had a stronger, clearer, more compelling message, that just sort of went right to the heart of where Americans are, they would have swept the board. What Republicans want, what conservatives want, honestly is not what most, their policy slate is not what people want. When you actually put progressive when you put progressive issues in front of people without mentioning party. People want the progressive agenda, 100%. I mean, like, the numbers are pretty
when you
clear.
think about, like, minimum wage passed, I think, in North Dakota or something like that. So these policies that really are actually considered progressive issues, but they're actually just issues that help people survive right now. I mean, it's like, but they're not. I think it speaks to your point. One of the things that I just think I just want to sit with that for a second. Like, men are like, oh yeah, why not? Why not me? And it really is like, this is social conditioning. It's also historical. I mean, we have a history of the president's placemat for our dinner, and you go, white man, white man, white man, white man, one black man, white man. Like, what is like, to be frank, I have two white sons, and they're kind of looking at it, go, oh, okay. But I remember my son saying, where's everybody else? Because he goes to a very diverse school, and he just is like kind of mystified by, like, who are these people? So hopefully the next generation sees this differently. But I think being aware of the reality and being intentional about meeting is exactly what your friend Aaron is about, and that is really amazing. So going forward, how do you see what like the role of, I'm going to get into religion, because actually you're like really smart about this. I want to mention, after 2016, do you remember this? We met in some conference room, some random place in the Bay Area, and we had a debrief. And this was right after the election, and everybody was like, well, maybe this and maybe that. And you were like, okay, now I know exactly why this happened. It was racism, and it was a reaction, and it was gender. I like it. This is not like a big. Where you see us going forward now? No matter what happens, we're going to have to get serious about building networks, coming up with messaging that works, and moving forward in order to protect our democracy, and in order to protect religious freedom for all.
Absolutely. It's look. I remember that it was at the San Francisco Foundation, old friends of mine, and they had brought together some religious leaders and some political folks to talk about it. There was a whole lot of like, oh, well, one of my conservative friends are saying, oh, well, this is what it felt like for us when Obama was elected. And I was like, no, this is not this is a false equivalency. This is not the same. No, let's not. Let's call a spade here. Right now, I think that Americans are really confused. I think that the level of misinformation out there is tough. I think that there are a lot of people, for whom voting, either Republican or Democrat is, practically a religion. Right. And so, it's its own religion almost. And, to even as their party, really goes places that I think most Americans, even conservative Americans, again, by the numbers, by the polls, don't want, there's still that sense of loyalty. Right. And that sense of, well, they speak the language that I'm familiar with, even though I don't like the thing that they're suggesting that we're going to do. Yeah. So I don't know what to do, and I don't know where to go. There are many Americans who lived through the flip, right? Of, Republicans used to be the left-leaning party and Democrats used to be the right-leaning party. And that wasn't long ago. Totally. I mean, that flip happened in the 60s. So, I do think we're in a sense of flux where people really are having to re-examine, their morality and where their morality calls them, and their ethics and their compassion. Do I still, this party speaks the language of compassion, but is actually enacting cruel things? Am I still on board for that? Right.
And I think that I think it comes down, as you've been like hammering this home, and I'm just starting to get it. Messaging matters, and how you get the message out there matters. And this is something you've spent your career thinking about specifically. And you mentioned it in passing. I want to stop there for a second. Disinformation, misinformation, intentionally wielded in order to stoke fear, in order to stoke distrust. And, this is something that you're in the center of this conversation about how do we leverage technology, especially technology, in order to counteract that with a better message, with a more inclusive message, with a welcoming message, and to say, don't trust this message, because that's, I think there's an idea, there's a zero-sum, we're being presented with a zero-sum game. Too many immigrants, too many people of different skin pigmentation, different genders are coming to take our country. I mean, really. I mean, that's that's the fear. That's the fear factor out there. Instead of saying, you're welcome too. No one is being kicked out here. This is an inclusive vision. And so how do we specifically leverage technology?
Hey, I think one way in which we can leverage technology is, look, there's a new grassroots out there, right? It's called influencers and creators. And, I do think that, the conservatives have actually been pretty good at getting out there and, tapping into that, particularly in faith communities. They understand, that pastors, and reverends, that religious people are online, and I think that, the left has been remiss in understanding, that, people don't trust organizations right now. They don't trust governments. They do trust the people in their lives, whether directly, the pastor who leads their local church, or, someone that they're looking to, who gives them inspiration. There are actually so many faith-based influencers online. And yet, what's the relationship that, organizations have, with that? FaithWorks is a great example of those people, really thinking about it and coming together. But we need more of that. We really do need people of faith, who can speak in language that, brings, reaches people in their heart, not just their minds, but in their hearts, right? And in their souls. That soul level speech is really what's going to reach people in terms of creating policies that actually benefit human beings. So a great example would be student loans. This is a place where I think that, people of faith could step forward and say, look, that whole, it's easier for, a camel to go through the eye of a needle, than a rich man to go to heaven. We just spent billions of dollars in the PPP loans, right? I mean, my business received a PPP loan. Thank God. I mean, we needed it. But why is it okay to give, millions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars, billions of dollars to businesses, to bail them out and give them a lift during a tough time, and not our future, our students, our children, right? Who are preparing for a different tomorrow. Why would one be okay and the other be some sort of violation of like a fundamental tenet, which is what they're trying to say, right? That the president apparently has the right, the executive branch has the right to help, businesses, but not students, not our future. That's insane. So, I think that that's a place where, I really do think that, pastors, reverends, people of faith must step forward and say, what are we thinking? Like, why wouldn't we want to, help, our most vulnerable, some of our most vulnerable members of society?
And that's just one example. It's, there's so many examples. Cheryl Conti, you are amazing. People, first of all, first stop is to go see her website, all the things that Cheryl Conti is doing, cherylconti.com.
Impactseat.org is a great place to go, or dobigthings.today.
Yeah, these are companies that have been created by the wisdom of Cheryl, but also places that anyone can find tools and hopefully work with Cheryl and her amazing team to do big things and to change the world. Cheryl Conti, thank you so much for joining me on State of Belief.
Thank you so much for doing this.
We're recording this today on Veterans Day, and on my way to the studio, I saw so many individuals from different backgrounds, different races, coming together, all in uniform, showing their pride in being part of our armed forces. We want to say thank you to all of those who have served, and also recognize that anyone should be able to serve in our military, regardless of their religious background, and regardless of how they express that. Right now, we're in a brief supporting the Sikh Coalition in making sure that members of the Sikh community can serve in the Marine Corps fully as themselves. And this is an important point. Everyone should be able to serve, and we want to give our thanks to those who have. And with that, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this week's show. While there were lots of surprises in the midterms this week, one thing that is predictable is that we will keep seeing Christian nationalism show up in both local and national political races in the future. However, it is up to all of us to show up for a vision of our country that is inclusive of people of all faith and no faith, and recognize the importance of our ability to make choices about our reproductive health, about who we love and marry, and other issues of religious freedom. Democracy is still at risk, and we have to protect it. Next week, we will be in Washington, D.C. as Interfaith Alliance, showing up for people who are in same-sex marriages as well as interracial marriages, showing up to the Senate that is about to vote on the Respect Marriage Act, and we are rallying religious voices who are overwhelmingly support the right for same-sex marriage and the right to interracial marriage, and we are going to be lobbying senators, and we're going to be holding a press conference. I will also have the honor of moderating a panel on the Hill that is supporting those who experience violence in the aftermath of 9/11 only because they were associated with being Muslims. This includes Hindus, Sikhs, and Muslims, 9 of whom died in the aftermath of 9/11. We are holding a panel, and we are urging our Congress to make a resolution saying that is not the American way. These are just 2 examples of the way that Interfaith Alliance is showing up right now. Showing up for people from all faith traditions and no faith traditions, showing up for the freedom to do with our lives how we feel called to live and love. And so I encourage you to join us at interfaithalliance.org to find out more. The conversations you heard today are the reason that State of Belief is on the air. I hope you'll consider helping us to amplify these voices by making a financial contribution to keep this program going strong. Information on how to donate is available at stateofbelief.com. That's stateofbelief.com. You can be part of making sure informative and encouraging voices like these are heard by sharing the program with friends and family. Let's get more people listening and more people taking part in these conversations both on and off the air. Never miss an episode by subscribing to the weekly State of Belief podcast on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. And join the conversation. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter at State of Belief, and share State of Belief with the people in your life. State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week for more inspiring conversations as we develop creative and powerful ways to move forward in this country together. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Raushenbush, and that's State of Belief.
I think it's time we stop. Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.